Welcome to Technically You, your go-to podcast for all things tech, security, and the digital world. Today, we're diving into something that keeps enterprise logins smooth and secure, SAML. Single sign-on technology saves companies millions in IT costs each year. But what most people don't realize is that it's actually making their personal data more vulnerable, not less. Let me explain why that matters.
That's really interesting timing because I just helped set up a company-wide authentication system, and the security implications were eye-opening.
Well, let's dive into SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. Think of it as the bouncer at an exclusive club who remembers your face and lets you into every VIP area without checking your ID again.
You know what's fascinating? According to recent studies, companies using SAML report up to 75% fewer security breaches compared to those using traditional login methods.
That's right, and here's why. Instead of having passwords scattered across dozens of different systems, you've got one super secure vault. It's like having Fort Knox instead of hiding money under your mattress.
But doesn't that make it a bigger target? I mean, if hackers crack that one system,
Actually, that's a common misconception. The centralized nature means companies can invest heavily in securing that single point. Industry data shows that SAML-based systems have a 92% lower chance of credential theft.
that's incredible. And I imagine it must save tons of time, too.
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. A recent survey showed that companies implementing SAML reduced their IT support tickets by 70%, mostly from eliminated password resets. That translates to about $1 million in savings annually for large enterprises.
Those numbers are staggering when you think about the scale.
And here's something even more interesting. SAML processes over 4 billion authentication requests daily across major enterprises. That's more than the number of Google searches worldwide.
Speaking of scale, how does this work in practice for big organizations?
Well, take a major university system, for example. They're handling over 100,000 users accessing hundreds of different applications. Before SAML, they had an average of 3,000 password reset requests per day.
That must have been a nightmare for their IT department.
Exactly. But after implementing SAML, those requests dropped to just 200 per day. Plus, they saw a 60% reduction in unauthorized access attempts.
These benefits sound amazing, but there must be some drawbacks, right?
Well, here's the interesting part. The main vulnerability isn't technical, it's human. If someone's main account gets compromised, the attacker potentially has keys to the kingdom. That's why 85% of SAML using companies now require two-factor authentication.
That makes perfect sense as an extra security layer.
And speaking of security layers, let's talk about how SAML handles what's called attribute passing. It's basically sharing specific user information between systems securely.
How does that work in real-world scenarios?
Picture a hospital system. When a doctor logs in, SAML automatically tells each application what departments they work in, what patient records they can access, and what procedures they're certified to perform. It's handling about 10,000 different permission combinations per user.
That level of complexity would be impossible to manage manually.
Exactly right. And here's where it gets really interesting. SAML is processing these complex permissions in milliseconds. The average SAML transaction takes just zero point 0.2 seconds.
That's remarkably fast for such a secure system.
But you know what's really fascinating? While SAML dominates enterprise security, newer technologies like OAuth are taking over in the consumer space. It's like watching digital evolution in real time.
How do companies decide which one to use?
Recent market analysis shows that 92% of Fortune 500 companies use SAML for internal systems, while 88% use OAuth for customer-facing applications. It's not about which is better, they serve different purposes.
That really helps explain why both technologies continue to coexist.
Looking ahead, experts predict that by 2025, over 95% of enterprise authentication will use some form of SAML or its derivatives. It's becoming the universal language of digital trust.
That's quite a future for something most people don't even know exists.
And that's really the beauty of it. The best security systems are the ones you never have to think about. They just work silently in the background, keeping our digital lives safe and simple.
That's it for today's episode of Technically You. If you liked this podcast, hit that subscribe button and leave us a review.
And if you have a tech topic you want us to cover, drop it in the comments or send us a message.
Thanks for listening, and as always, stay secure, stay curious, and stay logged in. Unless you forget your password.
See you next time.